Okay. It is part 3. Ow. And sorry, what's this? All right. One of the most of you won't care, but one of the channels that I like to follow is a guy named Tom Grossi. Him, another one, Brandon Perna. But they follow NFL football. And the one guy, Tom Grossi, really wanted one of the players that the Lions ended up drafting. Well, he just had a picture where he got to meet him. I thought it was very funny. None of that's related. So let's get into part 3. And they're about to have elections for who the next, I want to say Khan, but who will be the next leader.
Defeat at the Battle of the Indus River in the spring of 1221, the prince of the Khwarezmian Empire, Jalal al-Din, continued retreating deeper into Punjab. Soon the Mongol troops stopped chasing him. Jalal al-Din spent the next 3 years gathering his forces in the area and even took over most of Punjab. He attempted to get the Mamluk Sultan of Delhi to ally against the Mongols, but the latter wasn't eager to draw the ire of Genghis. Instead, in 1224, the Sultan attacked Jalal al-Din. The prince was forced to leave Lahore. He raided Gujarat and then returned to Iran in the same year. As his father was long dead, Jalal al-Din claimed the throne of Khwarezm. Iran and the Caucasus had been weakened by Jebbe and Subutai a few years before, so he had an easy time consolidating the region. He destroyed the state of the Atabegs of Azerbaijan and moved his capital to Tabriz, away from Mongol reach. In the same year, he vassalized the Shirvanshahs and attacked Georgia. In 1226, the Georgians were defeated at the Battle of Garni. Tbilisi was captured after that, and both the Christian and Muslim population of the city were massacred. The Mongols sent a small army to Iran in 1227, but Jalal al-Din crushed it near Ray. His activity in the area provoked a response. The Sultan of the Seljuks of Rum, Kaikubad I, Ayyubid Sultan al-Kamil, and the King of Cilician Armenia, Hethum I, united their forces against him in 1228, and the Khwarezmian forces were soundly defeated near Erevan. This war weakened him, and all over Iran and the Caucasus, rebellions against him began. The great Khan Ogedei used this and sent an army under Chorma Khan to conquer Iran once again. The Mongols won a battle against the Shah somewhere in central Iran in 1231. Jalal al-Din retreated all the way to modern Turkey, with the Mongols chasing. Finally, Jalal al-Din was assassinated in Silvan, and the Khwarezmian Empire ceased to exist. The Seljuks, Cilicia and Georgia became the vassals of the Great Khan. Little of note happened in the region in the next decade, as the Mongols were busy with the campaign in Eastern Europe. But when Ogedei passed away in 1241, the Mongol governor of the region, Baiju, asked the Seljuk Sultan Kaikhosro II to renew his vassal oath. The latter refused and raided another Mongol vassal, Georgia. Baiju pushed the Seljuks back and moved towards Erzurum. The envoys sent to the city were not killed, but insulted. Still, Erzurum was taken and its population was massacred. The Mongols then retreated to amass more troops in Georgia and Armenia. Sultan Kaikhosro II asked his allies to help, and received minor assistance from Nicaea, Trebizond, the Ayyubids, and even recruited some mercenaries from among the Crusaders. The 30,000-strong Mongol army moved into Seljuk territory in 1243, and Kyrgyzstar's 60,000 met them in June at Kursidar near modern-day Sivas. We know very little about the ensuing battle, but the Mongols feigned retreat yet again and forced the Seljuk vanguard, which had around 20,000 troops, to chase them. As soon as a significant gap formed between the vanguard and the rest of the Sultan's forces, the Mongols turned back, surrounded and crushed the Seljuks. The Sultan and his advisors retreated, and the Seljuks were forced to become Mongol vassals yet again.
Doesn't anyone communicate and say, hey, this is the type of thing that they do, don't fall for it? It's a stupid question. I know the answer is probably no, because the people who do know about it are killed. But it's like, I'm seeing the same tactic and everyone's falling for it.
In Mongolia, Mongke became the Great Khan in 1251 and gave his brothers Kublai and Hulagu supervisory roles in China and Persia respectively. In 1256, Hulagu entered the Middle East with more than 100,000 warriors. He conquered the remnants of the Khwarezmian Empire and then moved against the legendary Hashashin Order. These renowned and feared assassins held dozens of fortresses, but a combination of infighting and the fact that by now the Mongols were experts at siege warfare inflicted heavy casualties upon them. Their Grand Master surrendered and handed all the fortresses to Hulagu. With all of Iran secured, Hulagu sent word to the Abbasid Caliph al-Mustasim demanding his obedience, but the latter refused. On January 11th, 1258, the Mongols approached Baghdad, the biggest and most prosperous city of its time. Al-Mustasim finally decided to meet them in battle and sent out a force of 20,000 cavalry to attack the Mongols. These troops defeated the Mongol vanguard, but rather than retreat to the safety of the city walls, they set up camp and enjoyed a feast of celebration. The next morning, they were surrounded by the Mongols on one side and by the river on the other. Those who were not killed in the slaughter drowned. The Mongols built walls around the city to provide safety for the siege engines, as well as to prevent the defenders from breaking out. Al-Mustasim made attempts to negotiate peace, but that ship had already sailed. By February 10, 1258, the city surrendered under a constant barrage of catapult fire. The sacking continued for 7 days, and only the Christian population of the city was spared. The Grand Library of Baghdad was burned to the ground. This destruction put an end to the Islamic Golden Age and moved the center of power from Baghdad to Cairo.
I know how important Baghdad was and how just special that city was, and I thought it was raided by the Mongols, so it's devastating because it was just it was ahead of its time, and that's crushing. Because 7 days to destroy. Well, now why only save the Christian population? That's weird. Is it because the Christians lived there, but that was more of a Islamic territory, so they were kind of seen as they had nothing to do with it? Yeah, that's too bad. There's some places that are destroyed, and you think it kind of, I would place this as setting humans, just civilization, just taking steps backwards instead of going, advancing all the time. You're just destroying so much knowledge, so much good. And they didn't realize it, is the only thing I could think of.
For the first time in Muslim history, Islam had no caliph. Hulagu didn't intend to stop as he pushed forwards towards Syria. Aside from the coastal territory belonging to the Crusader states, most of the Levant was still under the control of the Ayyubid Sultanate, which was weakened by the loss of Egypt to the Mamluks. The Ayyubids offered to pay tribute, but Hulagu was not interested. He was joined by the Georgians, Armenians, and the troops of the Crusader prince Bohemond VII, and on January 18, 1260, Aleppo was besieged and suffered the same fate as Baghdad. This caused massive panic and resulted in the cities of Homs and Damascus willingly surrendering, sparing themselves from destruction. But suddenly grave news was delivered to Hulagu. The great Khan Mongke died of sickness during the war against the Song dynasty in China. This sent a ripple through the empire and halted the massive campaigns. The empire was on the brink of civil war, and Hulagu left the Levant for Mongolia. One or two Tumans stayed in the region under the command of Kitbuka. The Mamluks were offered peace, but they knew that Hulagu left with the majority of his troops, so the Mongol envoys were killed. Kitbuka tried to form an alliance with the Crusader states, however that attempt failed. Mamluk Sultan Qutuz assembled his army and moved to Palestine. When news of this reached Kitbuka, he prepared to meet the Mamluks' army, but a rebellion in Damascus slowed him down. Meanwhile, the Mamluks moved north and camped outside of Acre. Mongol spies reported back to Kitbuka that the enemy army outnumbered his at least 2-1. Still, the Mongol general left Damascus with an army of some 25,000 men, made up of Mongols, Georgians and Armenians. In early September 1260, he crossed the Jordan River and entered the valley near the village of Angelut, where, according to legend, David slew Goliath. The Mongol cavalry charged the Mamluk vanguard commanded by Baybars. This group broke under the charge and fled up the valley. Kitbuka gave chase, but in reality, the Mongols were falling for their own trick, as Baybars was luring his enemies in with this retreat. The Mongols pursued the broken vanguard to the valley, where Qutuz awaited with most of his forces. Baybars' troops finally reached the main line. Despite having vastly superior numbers, the Sultan was cautious and stayed in position. Kitbuka used that and decided to commit all of his troops. The Mongols were to engage the entire Mamluk army. The Mongol second line was ordered to wheel right and run the Mamluk front ranks towards Qutuz's left wing. The entire left flank of the Muslim army started crumbling under the Mongol pressure. The Sultan tried to regain his left side for hours. His troops from the right flank were sent to the left, and eventually the Mongols were pushed back and the left side was restored. Qutuz sent his reserves to the extreme wings. It was the moment for the final attack, and Qutuz personally led his bodyguards into battle. The Mongol army fought well, but they were pinned in place by the overwhelming numbers of their foe. When all the Mongol troops were engaged, Qutuz sent his extreme flanks into the attack. The Mongols were close to being surrounded, and when their leader died in the center, they started to flee. They lost between 5,000 and 10,000 warriors.
Okay, so earlier when I said, doesn't anyone pay attention to the... Okay, so one person paid attention. My fault.
The Mamluks won at Angelut using their superior numbers and by mirroring the usual Mongol tactics. Angelut also made the Mamluks into the most significant Muslim power of its time. Internal conflicts over the succession delayed the Mongol response, and while they didn't know it yet, this would be their zenith and the beginning of the end of the greatest empire the world had ever seen. The great Khan Mongke died in 1259 while campaigning against the Song. His youngest brother Arik was in the capital Karakoram while Kublai and Hulagu were campaigning. Instead of returning home, Kublai decided to finish his fight against the Song. Arik declared himself the Great Khan with the support of the noble houses, who saw Kublai as too soft because of his Buddhist beliefs. Upon learning this, Kublai declared himself Khan and marched against his brother, starting a civil war.
I will say this. I'm surprised it took this long for a civil war. Honestly, I'm surprised it took this long.
Meanwhile, to the west, the Muslim leader of the Golden Horde, Berke, wasn't going to forgive the sacking of Baghdad. He used the fact that Hulagu was on his way to China to start raiding the territories of the Ilkhanate. The territory of the House of Chagatai separated the two civil wars within the Mongol Empire, but it would be used as a political chip in the conflict. The empire was now divided into 5 parts. The war between Arik and Kublai is known as the Toluid Civil War. We know very little about this conflict, but it started in 1260 and lasted for 4 years. During this war, Kublai made the crucial decision to leave South China and focus on the north, while the Song were retaking some of their lost territories with nearly no resistance. Arik attacked the Western Xia territories but was repelled. Kublai then advanced on Karakoram, which was left abandoned, and razed it to the ground. At the same time, both Arik and Kublai attempted to place their candidates on the throne of the Chagatai Khanate. Arik intercepted Kublai's nominee and assassinated him. Chagatai's grandson, Alku, was made the Khan. However, when Arik's situation deteriorated, Algu declined to help him in the war and even killed his envoys. Kublai failed to use that to his advantage, as he had to pull back his forces to parts of China which were in open rebellion. This allowed Arik to go to war against Algu, and while he did win this conflict over the Chagatai Khanate, he did so with heavy casualties. As a result, many of his allies deserted him, including his own son, who stole the seal of the Great Khan and delivered it to Kublai.
Oh. That's got our sting. Does he kill his son?
Left with no supporters or supplies, Arik travelled to Shangdu alone and personally surrendered himself to his brother. Kublai became the new Great Khan. Apart from bringing discord to the empire, this civil war pushed Kublai towards an even stronger affiliation with the Chinese troops, bureaucrats and population. Meanwhile, Hulagu and Berke were fighting along their borders in the Caucasus and Khorasan. Hulagu returned to the area in 1262. In the same year, his son Abaka moved into the Golden Horde's territory via Central Asia, but suffered a defeat. Emboldened, Berke's army, supported by Arik, counterattacked but lost decisively somewhere to the east of the Caspian Sea. Hulagu then decided to use the route taken by Subutai and moved into the Horde's territory using the pass of Derbend. Initially, this campaign looked promising, and the enemy retreated under the pressure. Hulagu sent a portion of his force, led by his son, to pursue the foe. They came upon a deserted but well-provisioned camp and decided to rest and feast. This, however, was a trap, and they were surprised by the main force of the Golden Horde. After heavy fighting, the Ilkhanate's troops began to retreat over the frozen Terek River. But the ice cracked under the weight of men and horses, and many drowned in the freezing water. Hulagu was forced to retreat to the south, and Berke regained much of his lost territory. Neither side had enough strength to continue the war, and when Arik surrendered to Kublai, the Golden Horde also accepted his authority. In 1265, Hulagu passed away, followed by Berke in 1266. That ended the hostilities, but still, the Mongol Empire was broken, and the legacy of Genghis was represented by 4 different states. With the civil wars over, Kublai Khan worked tirelessly to transform the Mongol Empire into the Yuan dynasty. The capital was moved to a city called Khanbalik, or Dadu, which would later become Beijing. In 1271, Kublai declared himself emperor. He and his descendants slowly became more Chinese than Mongol. He built over 20,000 public schools, was a patron of the arts, and constantly met with people from all around the world, including Marco Polo. The emperor issued incorruptible paper bills backed by silver, which were accepted across the entire Mongol Empire, something unheard of until then. Kublai transformed the vast network of 1,400 postal stations to work as trading outposts as well, opening China to the world like never before. This spread ideas, gunpowder, other inventions, and unfortunately, the Black Death. He created a highly efficient centralized government and transformed the army. Gone were the days of the horde. His army now consisted of a small corps of Mongol warriors and a massive number of Chinese troops. Kublai decided to take on the Song again, but he knew that he had to adopt new strategies. Song China had no hope of stopping the Mongols in open battle, but they had some of the best fortresses of their time. The best of those was the one in Xiangyang, which had supplies for years and had tall double walls. Kublai knew that in order to fulfill his grandfather's vision of conquering China, he had to evolve his army. 5,000 Yuan ships were built, and crews of experienced North Chinese and Korean sailors were recruited, with the purpose of taking the rivers of China and blocking enemy supplies. This new navy came with 70,000 trained marines, and was a testament to how adaptable the Mongols were. The siege of Xiangyang went on for 6 years, as it held the most valuable position in China, and its defenders knew that if the city fell, the whole of China would follow. Multiple attempts were made by the Song to break out from or reinforce the city, but they didn't stand a chance. What finally broke the fortress was a new design of counterweight trebuchet that was able to fire 300-kilogram stones from a distance of 500 meters. Xiangyang, which had held out for years, fell in days in 1273.
They held out for 6 years until they advanced the technology, and they fell in days. That's crazy.
Kublai's forces quickly swept through southern China, and although their position was now hopeless, the Song court raised 8-year-old Zhao Bing to the throne. The Song sent emissaries to negotiate a peace, but they were rejected. They ran from city to city seeking salvation, and eventually boarded a huge fleet. Kublai moved his navy to attack the Song vessels, and the decisive battle of this campaign happened at Yamen on March 19, 1279. The remainder of the Song fleet consisted of 1,000 ships, but most of them were transports with a vast number of civilians on board. Meanwhile, Kublai's fleet had around 300 warships, manned by 20,000 experienced marines, and he also had the advantage of holding the nearby lands and supplies. Some within the Song forces suggested that the navy should first claim the mouth of the bay to secure their line of retreat to the west. Their commander, Zhang Shiji, turned down this suggestion in order to prevent his soldiers from fleeing the battle. He ordered the burning of all palaces, houses, and forts on land for the same reason. Next, the entire fleet of 1,000 ships was to be chained together, forming one horizontal line with the Emperor's ship at the center. This was done to prevent desertion and to show that it was the last stand. The battle started with the Yuan forces filling small boats with combustible materials and sending them towards the Song formation. The Song anticipated this move and already painted their ships with mud. They were also equipped with large poles used to prevent the fireships from coming too close. The Yuan then blockaded the bay from either side and forced the Chinese to eat dry food and drink river water for a few days. This still was not enough to break their spirits. Seeing as their enemy wouldn't budge, the Yuan divided their force into 4 units and began attacking from all sides on separate smaller fronts. As the Song ships were chained together, they were sitting ducks, unable to change formation and work together. The Yuan hit them from the north when the tide was low and from the south when it was high, not allowing them a moment to rest. Still, the Chinese fought bravely and inflicted heavy casualties on the Mongols with their arrows. Suddenly, these attacks stopped. Festive music and laughter started coming from Kublai's ships. Thinking that the Yuan were now distracted, the Song warriors decided to rest. However, this music was a signal for a general attack. The whole Yuan navy was sent into the center under the cover of arrow fire. All the Song soldiers could do from the flanks was watch as their comrades were being slaughtered by the thousands, including civilians. Seeing that all hope was lost, one of the Song Emperor's close advisors grabbed him and jumped into the water, committing suicide. Xiaobing would be the last Song Emperor. China was once again unified under the Yuan, the first foreign dynasty to do so. Although the Mongol realm was now shattered, the story of Genghis's descendants was far from over. We would like to express...
It's pretty good. I see I can't really see it, but I think there's a second, oh, come on. I think there's a second one right back there. But we won't worry about that for right now. Okay. This was good. I liked it. So we're going to end it here. And, sorry. I forgot what I was going to say. Oh, there's a thanks button on the channel. You can donate. You don't have to. You can... There's a thanks button on the... There's a thanks button on the channel. You can donate if you'd like to. You don't have to. You can request videos. And I get to them when I can. None of that sounded good, but we're going to go with it because I didn't stutter. You can subscribe to the channel if you'd like. If you do, click the bell. If you don't, give a thumbs up. That helps me. It's being nice. And until next time, have a good day, have a good night.